In our second to last week of lectures or presentations, we'll be talking about what love is, both love and conflict. This week's topic title is from a video by Hadaway. I posted it on Scholar in case you need a little study break. I have a quick announcement. I don't recall if I've mentioned this or not, but I have decided that I will drop the lowest online post score. So your online posts will be worth 50 points because there will be 10 possible posts that you can get credit for. And I am currently about halfway through grading your rough drafts. I will be posting grades throughout the week as I make grading progress. I will go over briefly some of the week 12 activities. As I mentioned, I'm not completely done grading those. And then I'll go through modules 26, 27, and 28, and then I will review week 13 activities, of which there are not that many. So for week 12 activity feedback, both online post 11 and quiz 9, those are both great. I mentioned being about halfway through the group paper drafts. I have some brief feedback for those, kind of general feedback for everybody. Not every group turned in a rough draft, so feel free to take this feedback, even if you haven't turned in a rough draft, and apply it to your drafts that you'll be submitting in a couple weeks. And once I finish grading your paper drafts, then I'll work on the reflective writing 5. I wanted to make sure to focus on the paper drafts because you have an assignment relying on that later on. So the feedback that I have so far for the group paper drafts, you've done a great job with the title page. It looks wonderful. I made some slight tweaks to some of the headers. Make sure that your font size and font style match the rest of the paper. Other than that, you've done a really good job. Abstracts also look good. Generally, make sure that you have a sentence that represents each of the sections of the paper. So you usually have one sentence that introduces the subject, one that describes the method, one that describes the results, one for the discussion. Sometimes you can go to 2 sentences. Check the APA manual or the OWL online for word limits for the abstract. Before the introduction section, a lot of you did a great job pasting the title in lieu of the actual word introduction. One tip is to not bold any section header that starts a new page. So the abstract would not be bolded because it starts a new page. The paper title in lieu of the introduction header would not be bolded because that starts a new page. But the method, results, and discussion headers would be bolded. And then the references page, because that starts a new page, the references header would not be bolded. For the method section, in general, I want a lot of detail. Be so thorough so that it feels like you're going into overkill. Like it seems like it's too much detail. You'd be surprised if somebody else is reading your paper, you'd want them to be able to exactly duplicate what you're doing. And although it may seem completely intuitive to you because you're so familiar with your study, or you will be by the time you turn in the final paper, to somebody else, there may be some things that aren't quite clear. So you want to make everything completely crystal clear. In the results section, you've done a great job creating figures and tables. Definitely keep that up. It's a lot easier for a reader to get the overview of your results if they're looking at something visual rather than if they're looking at it written out. Think of how many articles you've read where if they have some figure, it's a lot easier to just immediately pick up the main points of the results. And a couple tips if you are doing group comparisons. If you're comparing 2 groups, if you only have 2 groups like an experimental condition and a control condition, then you would do a t-test, which means that you would have a t-statistic and a p-value. So you want to report both of those values if you're comparing 2 groups. However, if you're comparing 3 or more groups, there's a 2-step process to the analysis. The first thing that you would do is conduct an ANOVA, which stands for Analysis of Variance. And if you have an ANOVA, then you have an f-statistic and a p-value. And then if you do any follow-up tests to look at within those 3 groups if there are any differences between pairs of groups, then you would do a t-test. So you'd have the t-value and p-value just like with comparing 2 groups by themselves. And if your 3 or more groups are not different, So if your ANOVA is non-significant, then there would be no point in doing the follow-up t-tests, which is why the ANOVA is the first step. Then in the discussion section, did a great job summarizing the results, but I would suggest for the future discussions or the future research topics, go beyond just improving the sample diversity. So rather than saying, in the next research project, we will sample a racially diverse group of participants. Why not incorporate that into the study you have right now? I know that in a lot of research that's done at colleges, it is a sample of mostly white students at a mostly white institution, but you have the sort of luxury of pretending that that is not what you're restricted to. So plan how you would have a more diverse sample and just incorporate that into your method section. And then because you're not focusing on sample diversity as your future research idea, try and think of another variable of interest that would contribute to the relationship between the variables that you're already including. Something that might change the relationship between those, or that might explain the relationship between those. So you might have some kind of moderation or mediation effect in there. If you have any questions, or if you're not quite sure where to go with that, definitely just send me an email. Or you can also post in the form that I created from last week. I'll still be checking that until the end of until the papers are due. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me either of those two ways. Jumping into the modules. First we'll start with Module 26, which looks at who likes whom. There are some common sayings that can sometimes support each other, such as the first two listed here, familiarity breeds contempt and absence makes the heart grow fonder. And sometimes they can contradict each other, like the last two listed here. Birds of a feather flock together, or opposites attract. So the first two both imply that if you're around someone, you will like them less. And the last two contradict each other. So the first one, birds of a feather flock together, says if you're more similar, then you're going to want to be together. But opposites attract suggests that if you are more different, then you'd want to be together. So as you read through this module, look for references to these sayings and make a note of whether or not the book offers support for these sayings, if there's any truth to them or not. During the original run of Sesame Street in the mid-1970s, there is a brief video where Grover demonstrated the difference between near and far. This is another study break option. I posted the video on Scholar, so you can watch it if you'd like. It's a very simple concept, but it has important implications for how much we like someone. The book discusses proximity, actual and anticipated interaction, and the mere exposure effect. In a discussion of interactions, the book differentiates between geographical distance, like how many feet or miles away somebody is, and the functional distance, so the frequency that you might cross paths or interact with each other. And even anticipating an interaction can lead you to like something more. In Mere Exposure, the book explains why you're more likely to be good friends with someone who lives in your dorm, but even more likely to be good friends with someone who lives on your floor, and even more likely to be good friends with someone who lives next door to you. In a study of campus housing at MIT, researchers found that the distance from a person was a pretty good indicator of how close you'd be with another person. So if you live one door away, you're most likely to be close to that person, twice as likely as if they only live one more door away, and about 4 times as likely as if they live 3 more doors away. Module 26 also looked at physical attractiveness. It mentioned that people tend to prefer physically attractive dating partners at the outset, independent of personality traits. Make a note of how attractiveness is related to new products and marketing on page 324, and see if there's another module that you can think of that's related to that topic. The matching phenomenon describes how people tend to be attracted to others who are equivalently attractive. This could be referring to physical attractiveness, but it could also include personality traits or education. The physical attractiveness stereotype, which is often called the halo effect, describes people's tendency to associate aesthetically pleasing things, beautiful things, with goodness. So someone who is perceived as beautiful is also assumed to be smart, friendly, warm, outgoing, and successful. But it can seem tough to describe what's considered attractive. When researchers have tried to figure it out, they've found some similarities regarding physical appearance and personality. Symmetrical faces are considered to be attractive. As people age, their faces get a bit less symmetrical, leading researchers to conclude that youth tends to be perceived as attractive. Interestingly, if you average or overlay multiple people's faces, the composite of those faces tends to be perceived as more attractive than any single face. This is because facial composites are the ultimate in symmetry, the ultimate average. They have the least variation. The book also talks about reciprocal liking, the idea that we like others who like us. So if you're trying to get someone to like you, just let them know that you like them first. You'll also want to read through the Need to Belong section and make a note of the 3 human needs that result in a deep sense of well-being. Moving on to Module 27, which looks at the ups and downs of love. So Module 26 looks at liking, generally good things. Module 27 focuses on good and bad. Some of you might have felt different feelings in a friendship or in a relationship. The triangular theory of love describes love with the combination of 3 different kinds of thoughts and feelings. Intimacy by itself is liking. This could be feelings of warmth, feeling like you understand each other, you're able to tell each other how you feel, you can support each other in tough times and good times, and you share not just your thoughts and feelings, but also other things. The second is passion. This is the physical component, but it could also be any strong emotional need. So being really excited about someone. And the last is commitment. This is more of a thought than a feeling. It's the decision that you're going to commit yourself or devote yourself to a relationship or to a friendship, and you're going to work to maintain it through thick and thin. So in marriage vows, when it says for better or for worse, that's commitment in a nutshell. And this is called the triangular theory of love because it's often drawn as a triangle. And different types of love are made up of combinations of the 3 thoughts and feelings. Intimacy by itself is liking. This is friendships with closeness and warmth, but you aren't necessarily passionate about and you don't believe will last forever. Passion by itself is infatuation. This might be a crush that you had at school, someone that you never talked to, so it could be like unrequited love. Commitment by itself is empty love. This would be a burned out marriage where they're really more roommates than lovers. It could also be, in some cultures, the first stage in a marriage for those with arranged marriages. Liking, infatuation, and empty love only have one of the 3 components. In each of the next 3, you have 2, so you're missing 1. Romantic love is the combination of intimacy and passion. So this is like a summer fling, where it's relatively short term, but you are really excited about that person, and you might get really close to each other in those 2 or 3 months. Companionate love is a long, happy marriage with less passion. So a long, happy marriage could be, maybe you start out with passion, but at some point you settle into more of a satisfaction, and you're still close to each other, you're still committed to each other, but you don't have that fire as much anymore. Fatuous love is a whirlwind romance. This is a passionate, really emotional, but committed relationship. So this could be like if a couple meets and they don't really know each other that well, but after a month they decide to get married. That would be fatuous love. Consummate love is the ideal. This is where you have all 3. It can be easier to do this for a while, but it's hard to maintain over time. It's easy to fall into companion